our environment, so 31% of the Earth is covered in forests, and it's rapidly going down because of people clear cutting and burning forests, and just nobody's replanting trees. It's just loss of trees and other vegetation is just part of climate change, and climate change is just a big part of society. So what will happen if we don't fix this? Just loss of trees. It's just oxygen is not a big thing anymore. Like, people aren't taking it seriously. And without oxygen, just half the planet and species will go extinct. And like, farmers and miners are a big part of this. That they're clear cutting and taking forests down for fossil fuels, and so farmers just are getting bigger parts of, so they can have more farms and bigger farms. So how we could fix this is just we need to stop cutting down trees, and if we do, we should plant twice as many as we cut down. And we just need to stop clear cutting trees. So my opinion on this is just if we keep cutting down trees, that there won't be as much oxygen, and we need oxygen to live, and animals need oxygen, and same with plants. So yeah, that's my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Look like you'll be a professor someday.
Hi, my name is Christine Stoffel. I live at 668 East, 3525 North. And why I'm here is I would like to bring awareness to the North Ogden about radon. I have to admit that I have not read, if I haven't read anything in the North Ogden connection, I'm sorry if I forgot. But radon is I got to change glasses, sorry. Okay. Radon is a radioactive gas that is found in homes and buildings. It occurs naturally and gets into buildings through the soil. Breathing in radon over time may cause lung cancer, and it is now the second leading cause of lung cancer after tobacco smoke. 30%, or 1 in 3 homes, are above the radon levels that are unsafe by the EPA and the U.S. Surgeon General. They recommend that all homes, old and new, be tested. Right now, the average home in Utah is at 5.3 particulates, and it should only be 2 to 4. You can't see, taste, or smell radon, therefore it is necessary to get or buy a radon test kit to determine the levels of radon in your home. My home was rated at 11, and this was about a year and a half ago. I decided I had read an article about radon. I had someone come in and do a 72-hour kit, and lo and behold, it was at 11. And the norm should be 2 to 4. I have a house that had a basement that was unfinished, crawl space, and it was never filled with concrete on top. So I'm sure that's where the radon was coming through. Unfortunately, Weber County has been recorded between 2 and 4 particulates. To correct this, you may need to purchase a radon mitigation fan that will move the air from inside your home to the outside. And there's a lot of information out there. We have the EPA, we have the environmental quality study from the state of Utah, and it does state how bad it is in Utah. I have been connected a little bit with Huntsman Cancer Institute, and right now there's such an increase of lung cancer, and they're not sure. It's not from tobacco, and so they are believing that it is coming from the radon. I have a copy of my report also that was done. I just wanted to get the word out to the North Ogden residents and to people in Utah, because unfortunately this does cause cancer. My daughter has had 3 cancers in her lifetime. I don't want people to get cancer, okay? So one thing I am asking the city is to maybe actually, there is kits you can get. They're $9. They're from the state of Utah. And if we bought in a bulk and offered to the residents to at least get their homes tested, or if we give it to them at $9 or give it to them at a discounted price. That's all I'm asking. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
And anybody
Suggestion.
have any questions? No? No?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pat Dagley. I live at 888 East 2850 North on the corner. And the reason I'm here tonight is I have a real concern about that intersection. 2 weeks ago, Friday night at 5:15, I heard a bam outside my door. It's not the first time I've heard it. I knew exactly what it was. It was an accident in the middle of the intersection. However, when I opened my front door, the car was sitting 10 feet from my front door on my lawn. What had happened is the gentleman had not seen, he was going from east to west. He had not seen the stop sign. Some kids from Weber High were coming down 900, which there's no stop sign. They saw he was not going to stop and tried to hit their brakes, but they broadsided him. No one was hurt. And when the police officer came, I talked to him and I said, this isn't the first. There have been many accidents on the corner. One of the last ones was my granddaughter, as I watched her get hit. They're the same thing. Someone ran the stop sign. When I talked to the police officer, he said, this is a horrible intersection. And I said, I know, we can sit at our front porch any day and watch cars go right through the stop signs. And I said, it doesn't matter if you have a police vehicle down the street. They see them and then they stop. But we were wondering if there was any way to put a 4-way stop or blinking lights on the east-west stop signs. Because especially at this time of the year at 5:15, the sun is right at an angle. When you're going west, you can't see anything. It's really hard. We were lucky enough this time no one was hurt. But it really gave me a shock to see a car sitting in my front yard. And there was no property damage, but I don't want this to happen. I don't want anyone hurt. So I had asked the police officer, and he said it had to come from the city council first, any recommendations. So I'm asking that you consider this intersection. It's the only stop sign from Washington until 900 East. Then there's another one at 1050. And I just think with all the traffic coming down from Weber High off of 3100, it's a straight shot from 3100 to 2750 with no stop sign. You come down that hill and kids are going a fairly good speed. So I ask for your interest in looking at this and see if there's anything we can do. I would just hate to see a fatal accident or more. I'm concerned about my house. I don't want my house damaged with another accident. Are there any questions?
What was that intersection again?
888 East, well, it's 900 East, 2850.
Okay,
It's Cemetery Road and right, it comes down from Bates Elementary. Anything else?
Thank you for your comments. We'll take that under study.
I'm Colton Skank from North Ogden Junior High, and my address is 2747 North, 1325 East, and I am just wanting to talk about pollution. Pollution is bad for the earth because it harms people, plants, and animals. If our plants are harmed, they won't be able to create oxygen. What does pollution do to humans? If we breathe in pollution for 6 to 7 hours, we can easily get respiratory diseases and also have really bad asthma diseases. And one way this can happen is by smoking. Smoking is toxic air pollutants that are released into the atmosphere, and the bottom of cigarettes are also ways that they can go through our soil and into our waterways and pollute plants and animals. And how can we help this? We need to be able to recycle as much as possible. We need to be able to recycle used motor oils and filters, And a big factor in this is cars. Cars pollute a ton. So if you're like driving somewhere more far away, you can carpool or even walk or bike. And so where pollution is the worst? Pollution is the worst in India and Bangladesh, Egypt, and Nepal. But in the USA and Utah is the 5th worst in the world right now. And pollution is killing people. 800,000 people are losing at least 17 years of their life from air pollution. For every 100,000 people, 120 of them die. Air pollution is damage than more than all car accidents in a year, and 11% of deaths in the world is caused by air pollution. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. Look like a lot of homework tonight.
So my name is Dylan Anglesey. I'm also doing a presentation. I'm going to be talking about climate change and why it's bad for Utah. So climate change is a change in global or regional climate patterns produced by fossil fuels. So the reason why this is bad for Utah, heat waves are becoming more common and snow is melting earlier in the spring. The changing climate is going to decrease the flow of water in Utah's rivers, increase the intense and frequent wildfires, and decreases the productivity of ranches and farms, so we won't be able to get as many crops, or our crop yields are going to lower. As climate warms, less precipitation falls as snow, and more snow melts during the winter. So that means we won't get as much snow, or we won't have snow for as long as an amount of time. So that means we won't be able to enjoy snow as long, because we won't be able to have it as long. It also lowers the amount of water content in the snow, so our snow isn't going to be the same in a few years. Soils are likely to be drier in most of this state, so farms are going to be needing more water, but we won't be able to provide that water because the amount of water we get from precipitation is lower than the amount we lose from evaporation. Dams capture most of the melted water and hold it in use for later that year, but because of climate change, we're getting less and less water, which is bad for us because if we ever need to use that water, we won't be able to have as much as we usually do. And that's also going to affect aquatic wildlife, like fish. They're not going to be able to have as much water to live in. Because of climate change and droughts, it reduces the ability of trees to fight off pests such as bark beetles, because they don't have enough strength, and bark beetles are very dangerous, and they destroy our trees. And temperature usually controls the life cycle and the death of these pests, but with higher winter temperatures, some pests can live year-round and keep destroying trees, and new pests and diseases could be established. Therefore, a lot of people could get sick because of these new diseases. Increasing droughts and higher temperatures are likely to interfere with Utah's farms. Hot temperatures threaten cows' health. They also slow down a cow's growth, and they won't eat as much, and they won't produce as much milk and dairy products. And they produce methane into the atmosphere, which is worse than carbon dioxide. So because of this, it's kind of more bad than good that's happening. Higher temperatures and droughts are likely to increase wildfires. And wildfire smoke can reduce air quality and increase medical visits for chest pains, respiratory, and heart problems, so like breathing problems. Many plants and animals living here are near the limit of what they can extend for like the summer, the heat, and the winter, the cold, and like the air pollution. Hot days can be unhealthy and even dangerous, especially for young children and older, like elderly people, and the poor and the sick. They won't be able to fight it off as easily. High air temperatures can cause heat stroke and dehydration and affect people's cardiovascular, respiratory, and nervous systems. Here are some ways I think that could help with the problem. We can help by investing in renewable energy such as solar, wind, water, and thermal. I know that's going to cost a lot of money, but if we invest in it, we will be able to help slow down climate change. We could reduce water waste and food waste. We could eat less beef and switch to chicken. We can unplug fully charged devices so they don't use electricity. And for TVs and computers, we can lower them down to the lowest power settings so they don't use as much electricity as they normally would when they're not in use if they're on the normal setting. Instead of driving, we could walk or bike. For example, if we live close to a school, we could walk or bike there. We don't have to drive there. But when we are driving, we could carpool so there aren't as many vehicles that are producing gas into the environment and causing more climate change. Are we doing anything to help with climate change? And if so, what are we doing? Are we doing anything to help with this cause?
Pardon? May I answer?
Sure.
I know one thing that we've done over the last number of years is we converted all the streetlights in the city to LED and cut our power usage by about 80%. So we're pulling less of that electricity that's generated by coal plants and things like that. So it's small, but it's something.
Okay, thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Thank you for your presentation.
Hi, my name is Mason Pogus. I live at 3098 North, 100 East. I would like to tell you about my presentation on climate change for my world geography class. What is climate change? It is a process of the Earth heating up because of carbon dioxide in the air because of burning fossil fuels. This process contributes to global warming and warming up the air, or Earth and all that. I was wondering what the city of North Ogden is involved to help climate change.
We just answered one of the questions. Any other suggestions you want to make?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comment, presentation.
I am Alex Thomas. I live at 1194 East 1925 North, Ogden, Utah. I am going to talk about deforestation, which one of my friends has already talked about, so I will skim over it to make it a little faster and take up less time. Where does this take place? This takes place all over the world. There is Utah, rainforests everywhere, China, a lot of places, farms. How does this happen? This happens when farmland is built or when housing is created. It requires us to chop down trees, which therefore clears out an area, but also destroys animal habitats and can sometimes cause fatal damage to an environment. How can we stop this? We can stop this by setting up preserved areas just for planting and growing trees to keep oxygen supplies up and instead of keeping them going down. We can also set it up where as every tree you chop down, you need to plant down a new one. Or a kind of lumber tax where you have to pay a little extra tax for chopping down large quantities of trees. What does this affect? This affects everyone. It affects our oxygen supply. It affects wild animals such as deer. I personally have felt the effects of this by at night or just in the middle of the day. A deer, due to its habitat being destroyed, will come down into my yard to eat some grass. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll tell all your teachers to give you an A, okay?
I'll tell you right now, I like this teacher. I wish all the teachers did that. I don't know if I'd get into the math. But
Dale,
you got a presentation too?
it's a homework, Dale.
Teacher?
I'll invent one right now. Dale Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I thought it was interesting that one of the kids mentioned India. We spent some time in India this year, and Delhi, India in particular, and you can't imagine the air pollution there. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you can't see across the parking lot, and the garbage across the landscape all across the country. And so if you want to see pollution, like he said, it's the worst. It's pretty bad. The reason I came here is I saw item number 6 on the agenda is some kind of a consideration or discussion or possibly decision on something to do with the Coldwater Creek riparian restoration. And that's an issue that's near and dear to me. I take particular interest in that. Over the years, I spent a lot of time in Coldwater Canyon, and about a year ago, Spencer, who you're all familiar with, who has a very passionate interest in what's going on down by 1700 with Coldwater Stream, arranged for me and Alex Schmidt to get together, and I took him on my horses, and before Lewis put up the no trespassing signs, we rode up Coldwater Canyon and got in the very back of there and looked at the source of the water coming out of there, the watershed, the rock formations and that kind of stuff, the forest. We went around into Cowboys Paradise, and we spent some time there, and then of course he went down and spent a lot of time with Spencer. And during the winter, there were some of us that went down, and you probably heard about the cleanup that we did in the stream. We pulled all kinds of garbage, even a campaign sign. We pulled a campaign sign out of there. Styrofoam cans, just anything you can imagine was in that stream. So a few weeks ago, Paul Burnett from Trouts Unlimited came, and it's through the efforts of Dwayne Richards and Spencer Alexander that they arranged for them to come and spend some time looking at what we've got. And we have something very unique, and like Julie likes to say, the old soul of our city, this old stream that runs through our city that we've neglected and abused and abandoned. And as we talked to him, I learned that in loving this thing, we have to be careful not to love it to death, that we do it right, that we approach it very thoughtfully, very carefully. One of the ideas I know has been floated is to resurface the stream through the parking lot where King's used to be. And when we mentioned that to him, he said, well, be very careful how you do that. You may cause more damage than help in doing that, depending on if other pollutants are able to enter into that stream. And as we talked about some of the plant life and what needs to be done, and some of the efforts as far as the water passing through there, what needs to be done to help it flush itself and keep itself healthy, and the kind of plants we want in there, it became obvious that this is something for people with very specialized skills with a lot of education that understand the biology around that we have to be careful not to just jump in and do something quickly because it looks good and because it might fit in with beautification of a building on our commercial district. We've got to be, but it's something that we can do to leave a legacy for the people that come after us, and as the city continues to build out. I don't want to take any of Spencer's thunder away from him. He has done incredible work. You know, he's very passionate about us. He's an art about it. He's an artist. He has one fish named Tucker. You know he's got these fish named that are swimming in there, and he carvings of them and does paintings of them. So I would hope that as you get into that we make sure that Spencer couldn't be here. So just make sure that we approach this really carefully and thoughtfully, because we only get one shot at this. But it is very encouraging that we've gotten the attention of everybody in the community, and it's something that a lot of people weren't aware of. So I think that's the other thing. As we get into this, I think everybody would agree that things that are done by private individuals who are passionate about things usually turn out a little bit better than government-run things. So that's why I'm saying make sure we include everybody that has a stake in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Hi, my name is Stacy Gytris. Address is 873 East, 1700 North. All right. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for listening. We're on the agenda today, and so I'm addressing item number, now I'm getting blind, number 5. All right. To remind you of our situation, my husband Jonathan and I started adding on to our house a few months back. Starting about a year ago, we're working with John Call and Rob Scott to figure out if we could build an addition onto our home and use part of it to rent out through Airbnb or things like that. We were told that we lived in the correct zone and had the right amount of land to do so. The only issue was that the current ordinance for our RE20 zone required that we put the building in the back of our yard and detach it from our house. We didn't want it detached, and in talking with Rob and John, they suggested that we look into being adopted into a newer ordinance for the city center zone that would allow us to attach it. So we did that, and the council approved it, and we moved forward with our financing and hired an architect. And as we were waiting for our building permit, we received word that we could get the permit, but that there was a new clause in this ordinance we had just been adopted into that prohibited nightly rentals. This was discouraging. None of us had seen that in the new ordinance and didn't realize that was there. Our intent is to use this addition for our family and only rent it out at times when we choose to, and often to family. So there's a lot of stress over the situation at that point. And in order to move forward and not throw a wrench in our financing and the possibility of getting weathered in before winter hit, we asked how we could proceed and get started. And Brandon Bell suggested that I draw a red line through the kitchenette on our plans, so I did. And we went ahead and got our permit and started. We're finished with the framing, so we're about halfway through the project. We've got a roof put on it, minus shingles and winter guard. But we shared our situation with the Planning Commission. They had a public hearing a couple of weeks ago at the request of Councilwoman Stoker. They took a look at this and had some discussion on it. In the end, they did vote to give us a favorable recommendation, but it wasn't unanimous. Some of the concerns were centered around a fear of having multiple situations like this start to pop up, and people building something that, maybe even look like a duplex in areas where they're not zoned for that. But as it stands right now, if others choose to build outside of that ADU classification or accessory dwelling unit, or if we decide to build outside that ADU and just stay with that status, there's actually less control for the city. So building it as an ADU, there's quite a few things set up to, I think, kind of protect the city. For example, it can't look like a duplex because if you're building an ADU, you can't even put the door on the front of the building unless it's below ground. It would have to be on the side or rear or below ground. That's just one example, but there are quite a few regulations with it being an ADU. This is one reason that we feel like removing this clause out of the ordinance would not cause problems for the city over the next year or two. The Planning Commission was thinking we need to get a ordinance drafted that's strong, and I know the city's looking at possibly trying to hire someone to help overhaul a lot of the ordinance perhaps, but obviously that would be a little bit down the road before that's done, but it doesn't seem likely to us that it's going to be a big impact. As far as we're aware, there's only 2 people or 2 other properties in North Ogden that have even attempted something like an Airbnb. So I don't think it's going to be a big impact. If anyone does jump on it, though, like I said, there's some great guidelines in place already for ADUs. And then, of course, the fact that it has to be owner-occupied is going to provide a strong self-policing element in keeping things controlled and neighborhood-friendly. Planning Commission member Brandon Mason pointed out at the hearing that it doesn't seem right to hold those with accessory dwelling units to a different standard than people that are just in a primary dwelling or a regular homeowner. And something like putting a stove in can basically take us from a position where we could use our property one way to now we can't do that anymore just for installing an extra stove or a kitchen. So anyway, thank you for your consideration. We appreciate it. This has been kind of months long. You guys have had to hear about it, but we appreciate your listening and caring. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no other comments, we'll move on the agenda. We have a presentation this evening by Beth Holbrook from UTA. Appreciate her being here.
Mayor and Council, excuse me, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. Before I get started, I just wanted to say I've known Annette for a long time in my other role, and you have a fantastic recorder, so that I would like to have that noted because I think she's fantastic. And so I wanted to also let everyone know those presentations are the first time I've ever seen it in any city council meetings I've ever attended, and I thought it was kind of impressive. So I like that teacher too, although I don't know who that person is. I am here today, so again, I'll just state my name, Beth Holbrook. I am the trustee for Utah Transit Authority, and I represent Davis, Weber, and Box Elder counties. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about our governance change. As everyone knows, or perhaps you do not, we were appointed by the governor to represent the organization for this particular area, and it is a full-time position. And I'm here this evening because I want to make sure that there is a level of connection to the communities that I represent moving forward. And so this has been a long journey for me. I have a couple counties, and so it's taken me a little while, but I've gotten to almost at the end of going to every city council. So during this entire presentation or at any time, if you have questions, I will do my best to answer them, and if I can't, I will figure it out. So please feel free to do any questions, and I'm going to try to figure this out too. Thank you. So this evening, I brought in some of the standard service that is bus related, that is specific to North Ogden City. As you can see, these routes actually go to either Ogden, or they move on further and go to either the Front Runner station or some other city further south. You can see the ridership and the frequencies in minutes, and then the hours of operation. One of the other things I did want to mention as well, that we, according to passes, which is how we track most everything except ridership. Ridership is actually it is a infrared sensor that is on each vehicle that we operate. You can see that 10 of your residents at this time go to the Front Runner station to go further south. We have 7 average daily boardings, and I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about some of these presentations, I think there is an opportunity for us to enhance our services that we have and to do it a little bit more efficiently moving forward. I do also have some pictures of, I apologize, this is the map of these two routes as they connect through North Ogden City. And I do want to show some of the improvements that have been done within the last year for North Ogden. As you can see, this is on Washington Boulevard, and we are in the process of improving a lot of our high core route bus stops. We want to make sure that those are more visible and more taking care of the people who are riding those. I also wanted to talk about a long-range plan that has been simply put into the Wasatch Front Regional Council's long-range plan. This is specific to North Ogden in the sense that currently today, Ogden City has a bus rapid transit that is due to be hopefully funded, and part of that is to go to Weber State. And this would be a connector to that in the long-range plan. It's, just to be clear, it is something that is looked at by WFRC and is voted on by their elected representatives in these various areas. It's not a given, but it is something that we have taken a look at. For a little bit of reference, a BRT is a bus rapid transit, and I do apologize for the acronyms. And it is actually something that we started our first one in Orem and Provo in Utah County, and it has been actually very, very successful. We started out with a route that we anticipated would have 3,000 riders a day, and it is now at 14,000. And it is very successful in the sense that it is transporting students from UVU and BYU to both of our Ogden Frontrunner stations. And the intent with the bus rapid transit that is scheduled for Ogden City, as well as any future BRTs, is that they would connect to Frontrunner in some way so that there can be greater connectivity. Oops, sorry about that. I went too fast. We're also doing a pilot program called Microtransit, and it's basically designed to be utilizing technology in order to access transit in a way that is different. It's similar to a Lyft or an Uber. It's an app-based program that you would call. You would say, I'm here and I need to go here, and you put it within that system. The difference is that it is ADA compliant, and it is not costly. It is kept at a standard bus fare, which is $2.50. And as you're aware, if you hit Uber or Lyft, if you have a wheelchair, you will have a serious problem. And of course, the cost is based on necessity and timing. We are going to be actually starting this in November, and it will be in Southwest Salt Lake County. And we hope to look at communities like North Ogden and other communities that don't have a lot of service, because we want to gauge what level of service could we expect, because as you are aware, we all have growth issues, and if there is an opportunity for us to be more strategic, then this is a good way for us to collect that data. So I already talked about some of the things. Here's the accesses to opportunity. These are some of the options that are available to this type of a service that is not normally available in the private sector. One of the other things that we are also doing is we're doing the UTA service choices, which is basically we're taking a look at our entire bus system. We're really trying to see if there's ways for us to get opportunities that we don't currently have, or maybe look at the way the service is being done and maybe there's a better way to do it. This is a huge project, as you can see, and we've had outreach. We are looking at having continued development of this plan overall, and we hope to eventually get to an implementation date, which that won't be until 2021. And the reason is because it is actually every single bus route that we have within the entire service region. So we service 6 counties and 81 communities. This is basically one of the other things we wanted to take into consideration is the ridership or coverage portion of that. And Mayor Chug was there when we did an analysis. Just so for reference, Mayor Leonard Call is the Pleasantville mayor, and he is actually on the local advisory committee or council for UTA as well. And one of his dialogues that he had with the COG is to say, what is it that we look at when we look at future ridership or coverage, and how do we balance that out with our service? There were discussions in regards to, should we look at ridership moving forward and focus on that? Should we keep the existing services the way that they are and balance it out? Our Weber County is actually 60% coverage and 40% ridership based. And is that the best model? So that's kind of what the dialogue is going to be. For reference, the local advisory council wanted to focus on ridership moving forward. So they wanted to look at everything as strategic as possible. In other words, looking at major thoroughfares that we can access with the bus, as opposed to obviously this cul-de-sac type of scenario, because we want to make sure that we're doing what we think is going to be of the highest value moving forward. And that is my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions from the council?
Thank you so much for this
Very well done. Thank you.
opportunity. I'll just hand out some of my business cards for you guys, and thank you again.
Okay. Item 5, discussion or action to consider an ordinance amending short-term rentals. Presenter will be Brandon.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. This is a proposed ordinance amendment. And as such, it's a legislative decision. I'm going to go ahead and read the decision type statement regarding legislative matters. When the city is considering a legislative matter, the Planning Commission is acting as a recommending body, and provides a recommendation to, acting as a recommending body to the city council and provides a recommendation to such. The city has wide discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative action are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. This proposed amendment is the last in the last category. It's a land use text amendment if it is adopted. And typically, the criteria for a decision on legislative matters require compatibility with the general plan and existing code. Again, the item being discussed addresses whether or not short-term rentals should be allowed within accessory dwelling units. The background to this is that the Planning Commission discussed this amendment on September 18th of this year and requested that a public hearing be set. The Planning Commission conducted that public hearing on October 2nd. Mr. and Mrs. Giatris spoke in favor of that amendment. A little bit more background. This was addressed, I think, at City Council a few months prior, and Planning Commission was directed to look at this issue of whether or not short-term rentals should be allowed in accessory dwelling units. In creating the accessory dwelling unit ordinance that's now on the books, the city combined two ordinances together from the RE20 and RCC zones, and they incorporated in doing so, all the essential language from each section of those ordinances was incorporated into the new ordinance. In so doing, language was carried over which prohibits the use of ADUs as short-term rentals. We have one family who has concerns with this prohibition because of a desire to utilize an ADU for an Airbnb or VRBO type rental. The genesis of the RCC Zone ADU amendment came as a result of the Planning Commission and City Council wanting an alternative for properties in the RCC zone which were downsized to eliminate duplexes. And so that the duplexes went away a couple years ago, and then ADUs were later added with a number of restrictions. The ADU amendment was structured specifically to address allowing for an alternative to these downzone properties. So before a duplex was possible in those zones, then it went to basically single-family home only as the primary use on a lot, and then it sort of the pendulum swung back a little bit to allow accessory dwelling units. One of the requirements being that there's owner occupancy in one of the units, either the primary or the accessory dwelling units, for self-policing considerations. The only amendment that is proposed, or adjustment in this proposed amendment, is the elimination on the prohibition on short-term rental properties in accessory dwelling units. So the ordinance would, if it were to pass, would simply eliminate a sentence that states that short-term rentals are not allowed in either the primary dwelling unit or ADUs. Staff's position on this is that planning staff does not support this amendment. The purpose and intent section of the ADU ordinance that was passed outlines that accessory dwelling units, that their purpose is to provide for for additional affordable housing options while minimizing the impacts to neighborhoods, and implicit in the housing options is that it's a long-term situation for it to address affordable housing issues. The accessory dwelling units are, so in the purpose and intent statement of the ordinance that was passed for accessory dwelling units, it states, these provisions are intended to provide for affordable housing with reasonable limitations to minimize the impact on neighboring properties and neighborhoods, and to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the property owners and residents of accessory dwelling units. Staff is of the opinion that this type of ordinance amendment should be considered as part of a separate short-term rental provision. That would give the opportunity for both the Planning Commission and the City Council to determine if they should be allowed, if so, under what conditions, what criteria should be set to ensure that they don't impact the character of neighborhoods negatively. And so that's staff's position. There are a number, I wanted to provide some sort of clarification on definitions of these types of units, the terms that I've been discussing, to make sure that we're clear. In case you have any questions, hopefully I can head off some of those questions to start. Short-term rentals are generally 30 days or less. ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, are typically a subordinate dwelling unit. That's they're only allowed to be in place when there's a main dwelling unit on the property. And in our ordinance, one of either the accessory dwelling unit or the main dwelling unit is required to be owner occupied. That requires which imposes a self-policing function, so that it doesn't impact the neighbors in a negative way, since any impact to the neighbors would also be felt by the property owners on site. They're currently ADUs, when the current ADU ordinance passed, it was applied to our R1 zones and the RE20 zone, and I believe the RCC zone. And then again, the primary purpose of ADUs are for affordable housing, and is defined in the purpose and intent statement. Whereas short-term rentals are clearly a short-term issue that tend to be used for vacation type housing and short-term needs that don't necessarily address that long-term issue. There was a comment made by Mrs. Giatris about redlining the kitchen. The reason why that occurred is that in our definition of accessory dwelling units, there's 3 criteria that are needed in order for something to be considered an accessory dwelling unit. The first is that the 3 categories are that they have separate eating, sleeping, and sanitation facilities. And so staff's according to the definition and ordinance, staff said if you take out the kitchen, it won't meet that criteria. The difference with an ADU is that the more independent the living unit is, the less they're not. They impact the main dwelling unit less. They're more independent, and then therefore the main dwelling and the occupants of that main dwelling have less incentive to think about the impact of the ADU on the rest of the neighborhood, because they have separate facilities. And so you start to have short terms in ADUs, it can change that character to some degree when they have short-term rentals and entirely separate facilities. That's my understanding of the staff's position on that concern. So I think I've laid out pretty much everything. I will say that there's a couple of considerations that should be thought about. The first is, should ADUs be allowed to be rented on a short-term basis? And is the amendment consistent with the general plan? There are standards in the staff report that address housing types that talk about life cycle transitions and high-quality building and design standards, and then providing appropriate design standards and housing types, e.g. adding accessory dwelling units, which was done when this ordinance was originally passed. The recommendation of the Planning Commission was that they recommended approval of this amendment with the understanding that a new Airbnb amendment be written, while allowing the Giatris family the flexibility to proceed with their project. It was also referenced about a code update. Staff's currently in the process of working out a contract with a consultant to update the code in general. It's possible that could be part of that. I don't know that that's for certain right now, but at some point, staff's recommendation is that at some point in the future that a separate ADU ordinance be considered, so that it can be given the proper time and thought across many situations in the city. I think that covers all of my comments. Are there questions that you have for myself?
What was the Planning Commission's recommendation?
The Planning Commission's recommendation was that they recommended approval of this proposed amendment with the understanding that a new Airbnb or short-term rental amendment be written to pass the ordinance, and then work on a new Airbnb amendment, which would allow the Giatris family the flexibility to proceed with their project and add the kitchen back in and turn it into an ADU.
So, and that's what the red line is?
Yes, the red line is removing the restriction on short-term rentals in either the ADU and the primary dwelling unit.
So John, is there something that we could put on there, something to the effect that, we approve this as like this, but readjust it when, ADU ordinance comes out or something? You know what I mean?
So that could be part of the,
Motion?
of the motion would be a recommendation that staff start working on a Airbnb ordinance.
Okay.
Yes.
I noticed as I was reading through the materials that the first motion was to deny the amendment, and that was voted down 4-2. The next one was to approve it straight out. That was a 3-3 tie. And then the next one to approve and then work on legislation was a 5-1-4. So it left me with the feeling that there were more who wanted to approve it and then work for better legislation or more comprehensive legislation as we go down the road. That was the feeling I got from reading through the Planning Commission's.
Other comments, questions?
So will you just give me in one shot what we're trying to, that was a lot to be read,
Okay.
and I've tried to go through it, but would you just tell me in a nutshell what it is
So
what we're amending?
most of the homes in the R1 zones, the single-family home zones, just have their home on the lot. A few months ago, we passed an ADU ordinance, which allows a second dwelling unit, either separate, that's smaller from the main home, and or attached to it, that's also only a certain percentage. So those are allowed, and whether those stay or not is not being debated in this proposed amendment. The question is whether those smaller accessory dwelling units in the single-family home zone are rentals or not. So rentals of essentially 30 days or less.
How many people have we had inquire about this?
About
have that
this
many people in the
issue,
city?
about using them as short-term rentals? The Giatrus family is the only family that's asked about that.
Yes.
I think when this first came up and I said that we need to look at something because it's happening around us. And so if it does come more than it is coming now, we need to have something in place to address this issue because I think it will come. It seems to be a movement. And so I think I would recommend that the staff do look at a separate ordinance and come up with something in place so we can look at it and discuss it and know. So we're ready.
Yeah. Understandable.
Yes, Bill.
My wife and I have used on several occasions these VRBOs. The one that sticks out in my mind is when we went to Washington, D.C. We were just across the river from the Capitol in a multi-million-dollar neighborhood, although, a multi-million-dollar house in D.C. is not necessarily that grand of a deal. But it was a beautiful, quiet neighborhood with a number of historic sites and things right there in the neighborhood, a quiet park. And there were a number of VRBOs in that neighborhood, and it had zero impact on it was a pretty upscale neighborhood. We were surprised when we got there how nice a place it was. And
You brought the neighbor down.
I brought the neighborhood down. Margene brought it up or kept it level. I, of course, brought it down. You didn't need to ask that. You know that. But, I mean, if that's affecting how I feel about this, just because I've seen it in other cities and in very upscale neighborhoods where it doesn't have any impact. I think partially because of the legislation that they have in place and what you can and can't do, but I'm not convinced that the absence or presence of it will either denigrate or save a neighborhood's character just based on whether or not there's VRBOs. So I like what the Planning Commission came up with at the end, is that we allow the amendment and then we work on, as Cheryl and others have mentioned, that we work on a a nice comprehensive piece of legislation that addresses the issue. We're not a destination city. We're not like Park City or Washington, D.C. or places like that where we have a lot of people coming here. I can't see it becoming a huge deal. I don't think you guys are going to make much money at it. But I also don't see it overrunning the city. Because again, we're up here in the corner and we're not a destination. So could be wrong and probably am. But
Is that your motion?
yes, that would be my motion. Are you trying to tell me to shut up?
No, I'm just asking if that's your
Yes,
motion.
my motion would be that we approve the amendment and we have staff start working, and I agree with Commissioner Waite, his comments in the minutes, that we make this a speedy process to get the legislation done and not drag it out forever and ever.
I second that.
Okay, there's been a motion by
Is there a
Councilman.
number?
Probably gotta be an ordinance number.
2019
22.
that's ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Mayor, I'll move then that we approve ordinance 2019-22 as discussed regarding the ADUs and short-term rentals.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Swanson,
I'll second that.
seconded by Councilman Severing. Any other questions or discussion?
One comment is we would have to be naive to think that it's not already happening in some form, so.
Any other questions or discussion? Begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Severing,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 6, Councilman Swanson.
Mayor, as I mentioned before the meeting and was reinforced by Mr. Anderson's comments, I'm not prepared to discuss this tonight simply because we need to, as Dale said, we need to make sure we do this right. As I've read over Paul's recommendations and the ideas and am reading and looking at, this is a pretty complex thing to make sure it's done right. It's not just a matter of pulling weeds, and I mean, you have to decide what trees are noxious trees and what trees are appropriate trees and what bushes are okay and what plants aren't. And
We're
it's,
just wanting to talk about developing a committee, though. I mean, it's not, you're not going to decide.
well,
what
I
to
think
do.
we need to be careful about, I think if we just throw a committee together, the talk has been that we use the Trails Committee. I agree with Dale that we need to make sure we have the right experts on there so that this is done right. I think the Corps of Engineers may need to be involved. There are some other agencies. So anyway, I'm asking that we pull item 6 from tonight, and I'm making a motion that we table item 6 until we can have our ducks in a better row to make those recommendations. Oh, no pun intended. It was a good one, though. That we have our trout in a row, and we do this right. And it's more than just down there by Village at Prominence Point. I mean, this really runs through from Coldwater Canyon all the way through the city, and so it's a much larger project than what we've been exposed to initially with Spencer and the great work that he's doing. Spence and I started talking about this in June, and my understanding has certainly grown, and the scope of the project and what we need to do has multiplied many times. So again, that's my motion, that we table it.
Moved by Councilman Swanson to postpone the item number 6 on the agenda, action to consider riparian repair and restoration committee.
Second.
The second by Councilwoman Stoker. Any other questions or discussion? This roll call. Okay. Begin the vote with Councilman Swanson?
Yes.
Councilman Severing?
Yes.
Councilman Turner?
Yeah.
Councilwoman Stoker?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 7, discussion or action to accept a petition for annexation into North Ogden City boundaries for property located at approximately 1825 Fruitland Drive containing 1.02 acres. Presenter will be Annette Spenlove, our city recorder.
Mayor and City Council, Deborah Walker at 1825 North Fruitland Drive has presented a petition to annex, it is approximately 1.02 acres from Weaver County into North Ogden City. This county surveyor has reviewed the plat map that was presented to us, and they've said everything was right in it. It is in our annexation declaration policy, and they've paid the fees, and they're requesting an R18 zone, but that will be reviewed by the Planning Commission, and they'll make a recommendation to the City Council when it comes back to the City Council. Tonight, you are just accepting the application for processing. So we need a motion for that.
Questions or discussions for Annette? Then I would entertain a motion from the council.
So, Annette, I move that we accept the petition for annexation in North Ogden of property mentioned on 1825 North Fruitland.
Okay, been moved by Councilman Turner to accept the petition for annexation in North Ogden City, the property located at 1825 Fruitland Drive containing 1.02 acres.
Second.
And second by Councilman Swanson. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, we'll begin the voting with Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Discussion or action to consider accepting a resolution recertifying the North Ogden Justice Court. Our presenter will be John Call, our city manager and attorney.
So, council, every couple of years we have to recertify the Justice Court to satisfy the state requirements. As part of that process, there's a letter from the attorney, a discussion from the judge, information provided by the court clerk, and it all comes to the council, and the council either accepts or rejects this resolution. If you reject the resolution, then we would look at winding down the Justice Court, which is the court that handles Class B and C misdemeanors as well as some infractions. And we would, all that work would go to the district court here for ever. We used to, instead of having a judge, we had a magistrate or oftentimes the sheriff back in the day was the judge. And anyways, it's a model that most small cities still use. There's been some tension that the state does, in a lot of ways, want these courts back under their umbrella with absolute ownership. But there's also a strong feeling by individuals that there's a real benefit to having a justice court, particularly so our residents and those traveling through our cities, sometimes at high rates of speed, are able to come back to the jurisdiction where the ticket was written to talk with a local judge and who understands and oftentimes works through things a little better. And anyways, I think we've in general been real happy with it. The court does pay for itself. It doesn't make a lot of money. There are some jurisdictions where they make a lot of money on their justice court. We don't. We typically make $10,000-$15,000 is about it, and that's after covering all our overhead. That doesn't include building costs or things like that. So in reality, we're probably breaking even at best with that. So anyways, just wanted the council to know we enjoy it as staff and would recommend that this resolution be adopted. Any questions for me?
Ms. Swanson?
John, approximately what percentage of the fines and fees that come out of our courts stay in North Ogden versus go to the state?
So it varies significantly based on the type of case it is, but a large portion of your traffic fees, for example, go to the state. I can get you the exact numbers, but it's more than 50% of the traffic fines go to the state as opposed to staying in the city.
And the state sets the amount of the fines that the court uses, correct?
So they typically set what's the
maximum?
The fee schedule, the maximums and the minimums. And then typically, like when you're given a speeding ticket, they let you know what the fine will be, because it is set by state for moving violations, particularly. The chief is here. He could probably answer some of those questions if he had any, or he might just enjoy sitting in the back. So
I can tell you what I know, but it might not be right.
You're not vacationing on the money the Justice Court is making?
There is a state bail schedule, but a judge does have discretion, which he utilizes quite a bit.
It's a nice convenience for the citizens of North Ogden, given the fact they don't have to run down to Ogden District Court.
you sound like you've been there a lot, Mayor.
Well, I've only paid once over here.
And is there a resolution number?
There is. It's 07-2019.
I would move that we accept Resolution 07-2019, recertifying the North Ogden Justice Court.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Severine to accept the resolution 07-2019 to approve or recertify the North Ogden Justice Court. It's been seconded by Councilman Turner. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, begin the vote with Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Severine.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item 10, major project discussion or action to consider North Ogden City property located at 2550 North and 200 East. Presenter will be John Call.
So, council, this is the third time this agreement's come back, partly because of some minor language changes. This most recent version removes the last reference to fishery, but also because the last time when the council approved the agreement and suggested that wording be removed, we didn't do it by resolution. And because the first agreement and because the Interlocal Cooperation Act requires that all interlocal agreements be approved by resolution, we had to bring it back with an amended resolution just to make sure that it was meeting all the requirements. That was my oversight. I didn't include the resolution in the packet, and so sorry to make you think about it again, but it's essentially the agreement as approved by the council last time, just with an amended resolution identifying that it's been a change. So.
Sorry, I jumped ahead one item, but it's item 9.
Oh.
We were following you.
Okay.
Resolution number, Annette?
The resolution is 06-2019, and the agreement is A19-2019.
Okay, so I would move that we accept Resolution 06-2019, approving Amendment A19, W19?
Just 2019.
Just 2019.
2019, sorry about that. 2019 interlocal agreement with Weber Box Elder Conservation District to exclude all references to the facility as a fishery.
No, it's not a fishery.
Right, to exclude.
Oh, to
Exclude.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
You worded it right.
As well as other changes for the 2550 Detention Basin Project.
It's been moved by Council Severine to consider amended resolution approving the amended interlocal agreement with Weber Box Elder Conservation District.
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilman Turner. Any other questions or discussion? We will begin the vote with Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Severine.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Now we can move to 10. I must have been anxious to go home. Major project discussion or action to consider North Ogden City property located at 2550 North and 200 East. You're on deck, John.
Okay. So, council, this is, as we've talked about in the past, that this property has been declared as surplus about 18 months ago. We had a contract on this property at that time that later fell through, and now this would be the document that we would shoot out to the public, put some signs up, and then this would provide the type of information that we want back from anyone who's interested in developing the property. It's meant as a starting point. The question is what's in this document that the council doesn't like, what's not in the document that you'd like. We do have at least two groups in the city who are currently developing projects in the city who are interested in putting in proposals. I've reached out to them a little bit to try and find out what type of information they would expect to include for this type of a project. One thing to be aware of is that the offer that they most likely would provide to the council would be contingent on getting the zoning and everything that they would want approved through the council and through the planning commission. The idea would be that this would most likely be out on the market for 60, 90, 120 days, something like that, to allow sufficient exposure for the council to at least do a initial review. One of the specific phrases at the very end specifically says the council's not obligated to accept an offer. We have an out. If we don't like what we're seeing, then the council can say, no, we're just going to keep holding on to it. But it includes things like them identifying what they want to put there, the type of development they expect, what their timeline is. If they're going to ask the city for any money, I thought we should add that, particularly because this is in the CDA area, and oftentimes there are projects and money that can be expended for infrastructure needs. It'd be helpful to know up front if they want that, so that the council, as the RDA board, can make an informed decision there as well. And just some of those things, as well as a history about them. One of the key components to the RFP is the way that the proposals will be evaluated. So this 1, 2, 3, 4 is basically dividing up how the council, when it reviews proposals, might weigh those proposals. It's not set in stone that the person who gets the highest score will be accepted, but it's at least something to help measure, as well as to help identify for those who are responding to the RFPs to know where maybe they should be emphasizing their time and effort in responding. And that these numbers can be moved as the council saw fit. For example, Ogden City at one point gave some property to the school district. No, sorry, the school district gave it to Ogden City because they saw a better benefit to giving it to the city than they saw of selling it on the open market. So I'm not saying that's the situation here or that's even been a suggestion, but the idea is if someone comes in with the development proposal that the council really wants, but the price is really low, then you'd still have the flexibility to say, well, this is what we want. So any questions, or what sort of things do you want changed? Where do you want to start this discussion? It's kind of just open, so.
Looking at the information to include, you hit on it just a minute ago. I'd like to have the developer tell us up front what zone they're looking for.
Okay.
And it's one thing to tell us what they'd like to build, but it'd be nice to know what zone they're looking for.
Okay. And I imagine that information will require the staff, Rob and Brandon, to provide some feedback on if this is what you want to do, then this is the zone it would require. But that's easy to add.
Other items from the council?
John, I think you covered our request very well in the document. I mean, I really do. I think we have an out. It gets us figured out if it's even developable. If people are interested, at least gets us that information. And then once the proposal comes, we still have a way to vet it. If I remember right, the last one, they wanted us to fill it, bring in fill, and I didn't like that idea. We would have to pay for that. So
I'm already here.
Things like that, yeah. different feel. But, you know, things like that, I just, you know, still allows us to vet. From what I see, we can look at these proposals and we can say no. I mean, so I think but at least it gets us out there, you know.
Okay.
So I think you did well at writing this. I didn't see very many errors at all in the spellings.
Which is actually unusual. Grammar and spelling are not my strong point, so.
Anything else from the council? I think it's a good starting point for us to take a look at as we begin to offer this property for development.
So what's the action you're looking for on this, John?
So essentially you could do a motion to approve it with the changes that have been suggested, and then it would be helpful to give a timeline, how long you want to see it marketed for at least before there's an initial review. So oftentimes on this type of a project, you might say, we'll do our first look at, February 15th, 2019 or January 30th. But there's no guarantee that you wouldn't say, well, we still want to keep our options open and we're going to extend it for another. But when do you want to have that first review, I guess is what I'm saying.
So are we're putting a sign up, we're not having it real estate or anything?
That would be the thought, is put a sign up
But that's what we had discussed.
Yeah,
so.
then at least the council would know if there was enough interested parties, and I don't know, 3 or 4. 10 would be great, but having some movement, I think if you just got one, it would probably then be worth looking into listing it with a broker and extending that timeline a little longer. But I know at least one group, they could get something back in 60 days, but they know about the property. They've been aware of it, and so you might want to extend that at least a little bit to make sure that people who maybe haven't seen it get a chance to see the sign. And it's probably 30 days from when they see the sign to put together a real proposal for the council to review, I would think.
And the sign's prepared to go up? This is just authorizing the sign?
So we don't have the sign prepared to go up.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be long. We'd have it up in 2 weeks with it. And what we do is list properties for sale by North Ogden City, and then give a phone number and a web address so they could find this RFP and then get information on it.
So maybe by February 15th? Is that too long? You're not going to get it up till like mid-November, right? You say 30 days?
I think the sign will be up at the beginning of November. February 15th is probably a good time where the council's going to change over to let them not have it be the first thing they have to deal with. So development doesn't occur typically in the winter months a lot of times anyways, so. Okay, so February 15th, if everyone's okay with that. Okay.
Do we need to make a motion or not?
I think on this one, it would be helpful for a motion, just so that it's not just the staff out doing things on our own.
So Phil, I didn't hear all your suggestions, so why don't you make the
You
motion?
want to just make it?
Yeah, just make the motion.
I'll make a motion then that we go ahead and not list, but advertise the property as for sale, adding the requested information to include, the zone that the developer would want to the other items that are in there. I think that covers it.
And then the 15th of February.
Oh, and first review on the 15th of February.
Okay.
Thanks, Carl.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion by Councilman Swanson that we accept the consideration of the property and the RFP that has been written with the additions that have been mentioned by Councilman Swanson. It's been seconded by Councilman Turner. We'll begin the voting with Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Severine.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. True. Meeting is open for public comment.
Brenda Ashdown, 193 East Pleasant View Drive. I'm a little confused. I thought that this area where this detention pond is already zoned commercial. And this kind of brings me to the question, I was at the debate where the question was asked, does the developer set the zoning? And that seems to me like what you guys have just done. You want to sell this, but the developer is going to request the zoning to build what they want to build there rather than the city already having it zoned. Am I mistaken?
What is the current zoning of that, John? Isn't it agriculture?
It's RE20.
Oh, it's RE20.
Yeah, which is the city's we don't have an agricultural zone, but that's the one that the agricultural properties are zoned in the city, as well as the larger lot.
But I thought the purpose of selling this was for commercial. I mean, that's what we've been talking about when we talked about moving the pond, was that this is commercial property. We're going to move the pond from this property so that we can develop this as commercial property. So right now it's zoned agricultural. We're saying the developer can come in and ask for whatever zoning they want. And that's kind of, I don't know if everybody was at the debate, but that was a question asked at the debate, was why does the developer get to set the zoning? And it was debated that they don't, but it seems to me in this process of selling this property, that's exactly what you're doing, is saying it's zoned one way. We want it to be commercial, but we never zoned it commercial, but now we're going to sell it, and the developer's going to ask us to make it the kind of zoning that they want. Am I mistaken in assuming
Are you
that?
maybe thinking of the Double Lot Ranch and not the?
So council, I think that the concern is that with the request that they indicate what zone they want, there's two ways to look at that. One is the developer saying this is what you need to zone it, and the other is the city council looking at what they want it zoned and then deciding if that's the party they want to be involved in a transaction with. So if someone says, I want it zoned for, 80 units of apartments to the acre, then the council could easily say, well, you could pay us $10 million an acre and we don't want to do that. But I think that's the idea is that at the outset of the process, they should identify what zone they want to be under, so that we know if they're going to be asking for one of the more unique zones like the MPC as opposed to one of the traditional commercial zones. So, yeah.
So are we talking about the current detention pond?
Yes, right.
On between 2550 and 2600, right?
I'm sorry, Brenda, I thought for a minute maybe you were thinking of the Double Lot Ranch, so sorry about that.
And the process has always been, and is in every city, that when a developer comes in and says, I want to develop something there, they ask for a certain zone. We've had developments here in the city over the last 6 years that I've been here come in and ask for an R18 zone. I think that was what the original ask was behind Dale and Julie Anderson back in there, was an R18, and they didn't get that zone. So the developers regularly, countrywide, ask for certain zones, and they regularly don't get the zones that they want. So it's not they can ask for anything they want. Whether or not they get it is a decision that gets made by council. So the developer doesn't set the zone.
Okay, so then maybe it's just my personal confusion and I need to talk to one of you. I live in, I believe, the R20, the agricultural. I have acres. If I want to develop those acres, even though it's already zoned specifically, I come to you and say, okay, I want this zoned so that I can do multiple, I can build an apartment there? Is that?
Oh, you could ask for it. That doesn't mean you're going to get it.
Okay, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, you could ask for anything you wanted, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be granted. And John, if I'm right, when you subdivide and you want to develop, even if you're does the existing zone just carry over?
So whatever the property is zoned, you are allowed to develop under that zone and just go straight to the planning commission with a subdivision or a commercial application. If you want to change zone, then you have to come to the planning commission and then the city council to get that approved. So it's a 2-meeting process instead of at least 2 meetings.
So if you want to develop yours as RE20, you could do that without council approval. But if you wanted to change it to R110, R112, R18, R4, or commercial or anything like that, it would have to come to council for approval.
So I'm curious if in the general plan, if this was designated as commercial, why was the zoning not changed to commercial then?
So it's common for general plans to kind of project where it's going to be in the future. Julie can attest to this specifically. I once said this was slated as a mixed-use downtown zone. This particular parcel was slated for mid-box commercial in the general plan, which is one of the areas in the downtown district. But it was a different map than I was the one looking at when I mentioned it. I think I can't remember what meeting, but anyways. So it's the general plan has called it out for mid-box commercial. One of the things that we might be taking as a proposal to the general plan committee is vesting the zoning, having the general plan committee pick the zone now and not letting developers come in helter-skelter and ask for rezones. And essentially, but that'll be a big process and require us to go parcel to parcel and pick the zones that they will be for now and in the future.
So what is it, where the new auto parts thing that's being built, what is that zoned?
That's in the C1 zone, council, and I think it has been for a while.
I think it's been a long time.
But it's one of our commercial zones, and where that new road is going in at 300 East, everything west of there is the RE20 zone. Everything east of there is one of the commercial zones. I just can't remember if it's which of the 4 zones it is.
John, on some of those signs that you see around that they are advertising for the parcels for sale, some of them do put commercial on it, don't they, on their sign?
Yeah, so sometimes you'll see signs that say it's currently zoned C2 or currently zoned something. There's one in in Harrisville right now down at Larson Lanes that says master planned commercial. And so oftentimes they say it's not zoned that now, but this is what the city has said they want it to be at some point in the future.
I think that should be on it somewhere, that's what we wanted. That's what it was set apart for. Like
Okay.
Brenda says, it's commercial.
We can add that.
Definitely.
Okay.
And Brenda, that's what we're looking for is commercial, so.
I
Well,
think
that's
it
what I
should be
thought, but if
stated.
it's zoned agriculture, which is where I am, I have 3 acres, are we going to break it up and sell it that way for 3 acres? I guess I just don't understand this process. If it's designated as commercial, then why is it still zoned as agricultural? Wouldn't that be confusing to a developer that they come in and say, okay, if this is R20, this is what I can build here? Or maybe I just don't understand that process, because like you say, the developers kind of come in and.
I think it's kind of like what Cheryl said, this is what the city is looking for in the future. So it may be zoned something now, but will be different based on a sale.
But I also think that's what led to that question that was at the mayoral debate, was these kind of things, that the developer comes in and asks for something, and the city changes the zoning from what it currently is to what the developer wants. And for someone like me that doesn't know real estate or development, it appears that developers are picking the zoning instead of our city leaders or our general plan picking the zoning. So that's all.
I could see that perspective. Thank you, Brenna.
And
Thank you.
council, sorry. So I just was pulling up the maps, and I actually told Miss Ashdown incorrectly. Her property is actually zoned R110 right now, but she is allowed to keep the animals and things she's been doing there because she's been doing it for much longer than it's been zoned that. So, but it is on the city map, R110.
I don't keep an animal for here, then am I no longer grandfathered
No.
in? Then am I not allowed animals?
So that's the way the rules are written, but we can talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there's not a developer out there that doesn't want to change the zone on every piece of property they buy. I mean, they want to try to make it denser, or they want to build a commercial. I mean, every piece of property they look at, and they're fairly hungry, and they look at property and they go, I want to put a big box there. I want to build, so R110, I want to build them at R18s. I mean, there's not a developer out there that doesn't think that way, so.
Well, barring any changes by the city council, it will be commercial, so.
Randy Wynn, 2412 Parker Parkway. I just had a little input. I had talked concerning the short-term rentals, for a little input for the council and for the Geotrices. I talked to somebody that lives near one of these, and they complained to me that the only problem they had with it was parking bottled up on the street. In other words, parking was not planned for. So I just give that to you as a thought.
I'll address that real quick. That is one of the things where if we build under the
State your
classification,
name,
sorry,
please.
Stacy Jaitrich. Do you need the address again? 873 East, 1700 North. Anyway, that's one of the things where if you build under the ADU classification, that's one of the requirements is parking. And so our parking is designed all off-road.
Thank you for that clarification.
Good evening. Susan Clement, 668 East, 3125 North. The discussion on the intersection at 2850 and North and 900 East, I must admit I ran that stop sign. Very first time I went through there, I just didn't even see that stop sign. That was a long time ago, though.
Chief Quinney, do you want to
Before
follow
you were
Susan?
There's no statute of limitations, sorry.
Oh, dear. So I agree, there needs to be something there that either that you've got to move the trees, and I haven't been down that road for a while, so I don't know how easy it is to see that stop sign. But blinking lights and your solar panel would be really good to bring attention to that. Also on item 5 for the short-term rentals, the Airbnb type, if we could put in the code that there is something that has to be posted in those short-term rental facilities, like in the kitchen or on the back door, on the back of the front door or something, stating the city code that they have to abide by. I know when I go to a motel or a hotel, they have something on the back of the door that it's like an emergency exit. But something that says what the code is in very easy to understand people language, not John Call's language. So that people can understand and need to understand that they have to park off the road, or they have to put all their garbage in the garbage cans before they leave, or when the 10 o'clock curfew, let's be quiet after 10 o'clock for your neighbors, and hold the tenants to that code too. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to council, mayor, staff comments. Councilman Turner?
None right now.
Okay, Councilman Severie?
I don't have anything either.
Councilman Swanson?
Just a couple of things. One, on these, I love this new format that we have on the new website, where we can click on the packet and we have the hyperlinks on the numbers. At the bottom of each page, can we have a top hyperlink that will just zoom us right back to the top? Sometimes I'm bouncing around and I have to scroll back through to get to the top to go look at a different item and get to its hyperlink. It's a silly thing, but it would help me.
We will ask the developers if that's something they.
Yeah, if it's not, it's not, but if it is. And then the other thing I've mentioned before, but would like to see it looked into a little bit more. In some of the cities around us, Harrisville, Ogden, when there's a parcel of land that's up for a rezone or for annexation, there's a big bright yellow and black sign that's put up. Right on the property, they're usually 4 3x4 kind of signs that'll say that this is a rezone, and it'll list the zone that's being proposed and the date of the public hearing. And so you don't have to go online. You don't have to look at a Facebook page. If you're just driving by and you have an interest, you can see that something's happening there. You can get the information. There's been some suggestions also that a QR code be on there, so that if somebody wanted to stop, you could pull up that QR code, and it would, I think that's what they call it, isn't that what they call it? Mm-hmm. QR code. And it will give you more information about the rezone. I think that would be helpful. That's all I have.
Councilwoman Stoker.
A couple of things. Chief, can you look into that, a four-way or a blinking light in that intersection and get that?
Yeah, I'll pull up some statistics and see, you know, what we got going on there, where's accidents.
I know you changed that light up on 3100 and 1050 to a blinker, so they would not run it. So,
Well, when I started, that stop sign was running the opposite direction.
this is true, but it got changed to a blinker.
More effective, I'll look into it.
Thank you. And then huge thanks to Public Works. It was brought to my attention that I was looking for the address so I could give it to you, but there's a pipe that was it's just before you leave North Ogden and go into Harrisville. There was one of our drain pipes that the grate was off, and kids were getting in there and going down in that big old pipe. So there was some huge concern about that, and they sent me a picture of it, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. So I got a hold of Dave and told him and gave him the address, and they were out there the next day, fixed it, so there's no kids getting that off or going down in there again. So huge thanks to them and to all staff and our employees for all you do. Thank you.
John?
Just so you know, the last week of mowing will be this coming week for the parks. The water's off, but we will be blowing the water lines out. So each sprinkler line will be on for 5 to 10 minutes in the coming weeks as they're cleared. So if you get any calls or questions, that's what's going on. It's not using culinary water, or Pine View isn't leaving it on for us. We're just clearing out the lines. I think that's it.
Okay. Annette?
Council, I just wanted to go over the council meeting agenda for the rest of the year with all the things that are coming up. The next meeting will be November 12th because of Election Day is the first Tuesday. And then we'll have the 12th will be our meeting after that. We will be canvassing the elections then. Then the next meeting, this is up to you to let us know what you would like. 11/26, that's 2 days before Thanksgiving. Do you want a meeting that day?
I would vote yes, because we have to adopt our moderate income housing plan, unless you want to try and get that done on the 12th. So.
I'm okay meeting on the 26th.
Yeah, I'm okay on the 26th.
Okay. And then our next meeting will be on December 3rd. And we'll have one on December 17th because the second Tuesday is our Christmas party, employees and everyone. So are you okay with doing a meeting on the third Tuesday?
Which would be?
The 17th.
The 17th, yeah, that's great.
Do we need to
Or
meet
would
on
you
the
rather
3rd?
do it the next Tuesday, the 24th?
I mean, we're meeting on the November 27th or whatever it is, or 26th, and
26th.
then we're meeting on the 3rd. Do we need to meet on the 3rd, or?
So I think we'll have a list of items, and if there's something that needs to be done, we can set one on the 3rd, and if not, then it might just be the 17th is all. But
That's kind of close.
I'm okay.
But those are the potential dates, those next 4 meetings. Most likely there'll be 3.
Yeah. And then, one more question. On election night, would you like me to order pizzas and have some soda pop here and have people here, the candidates here?
What was that?
On election night, would you like me to open up the building, have pizza and drinks here for people? Not hard liquor, just soda pop.
Some may need it.
Some people might want.
Is that something we've done in the past?
We haven't done it for a long time, but we have done it before.
I was gonna say, I don't recall it.
It's been a long time.
They did it the first
The
year
time
I
I've been here,
ran.
yeah.
We did it.
First time I ran,
Yeah.
they did it, so.
It's up to you guys. You just tell me.
I'm okay.
Someone suggested it, and I just said, let me ask council.
I don't care one way or the other.
I don't either. So we need to make and it's like, well, give me traction.
She doesn't need to write.
How's that for an answer? We don't care.
I guess indifference means no.
I'll send an email out and see how the candidates feel about it.
Good idea.
Okay,
That's an even a better idea.
I'll do that. All right.
Good idea.
That's all I have.
Okay. Chief, anything else?
Nothing there.
You were going to ask about the feasibility.
Yeah. See, any other staff, I guess we're covered. Okay, last of all, council, we've been in the process of selecting a firm to do a feasibility study on the police department building. And we've had some great applications. One of them in particular had a lot of experience with police buildings. And you budgeted $30,000 for the feasibility study, and this group that has the most skills for doing so came in at $9,500. And so we're going to extend an offer for their services to conduct the feasibility study. And then we'll set up a committee later on to carry out the process.
Well, that saving of $20,000, instead of pizza and sodas, they can have steak and shrimp at
And so council, just, you know, for you and also for everyone in the audience, what will happen is part of their contract is to work in outreach to include residents and then get involved with this committee that will be set up, that we at least staff is recommending it be set up as an official council committee. It means a little more work, minutes and things like that. But this committee would be working through the feasibility study and then coming back with a recommendation on if there should be a new building, and if so, what it might size-wise look like and what a cost estimate might be, so that at least the council has something they can use moving forward to as they talk about the timeline, if it's warranted. So
for your information, we'll move forward with that group. Other than that, thank you all for coming this evening. Appreciate your attendance and your participation and your suggestions, and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved to adjourn and second. Meeting adjourned.
No, I had Bishop meeting. We met at